the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I rise to speak to the people of far north Queensland who are facing some very challenging and dangerous days ahead. Tropical Cyclone Debbie is likely to particularly affect the people of the electorates of Dawson and Herbert. It appears that, Mr Speaker, that the severe weather has already claimed a life. Police have confirmed that strong winds contributed to a car crash that killed a tourist near Proserpine this morning. Tropical Cyclone Debbie is expected to intensify into a severe Category 4 cyclone before making landfall between Townsville and Proserpine around 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. The region is already experiencing winds up to 100 kilometres an hour along the coast, and the wind strength will continue to increase through the day. There have been up to 50 millimetres of rain along the coast, and this will continue today and tomorrow. Federal and Queensland authorities are preparing for the onset of the cyclone. The Australian Defence Force is pre-positioning assets ready for the cyclone, including HMAS Choules, to assist in the response. Mr Speaker, our emergency services are the best in the world in preparing for and responding to natural disasters, and our message to the people of the region facing the cyclone is please heed their advice. Evacuation orders are already in place for parts of the Burdekin Shire Council and the Whitsunday Region Council. For those in the path of Tropical Cyclone Debbie, please take care and stay safe. If you've received an official evacuation order, you and your family must leave home immediately. Seek shelter with friends and family who are inland or on higher ground. If you decide to shelter at home, make sure you're prepared, have your emergency kit ready, listen to the radio for cyclone updates. Check on your neighbours and vulnerable friends and family. Help them get to an evacuation centre. And with the forecast of very heavy rain in the coming days, do not drive through floodwaters. Remember, if it's flooded, forget it. Now, to all the police and other emergency workers, volunteers, full-time emergency service workers who give up their time, who courageously put their own lives at risk and will coordinate this response, together with the ADF, we say thank you for your service, your selflessness, your commitment, your tireless dedication to your fellow Australians is the very best of the Australian spirit. Time and time again, Australians show grace under pressure, bravery in the face of danger and rally without a second thought to help each other. These virtues will be on display over the next few days, where Australians face the worst that nature can throw at us. But, Mr Speaker, I have no doubt, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of all members of this House, that the people of far north Queensland will face the storm with courage and resilience, and the emergency workers there, the defence members of the ADF who are there, will pull together, as Australians always do, to meet the challenge and recover from the impact after the storm has passed.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you, the Prime Minister, for his words. I wish to say to Australians listening to Question Time today that despite the cut and thrust of the next hour, all of us will be thinking of Queensland and what it's undergoing in coming days. From Townsville in particular to the Mackay, household names like Ayr and Bowen, Proserpine, the islands, Hamilton and Magnetic and other islands. We're thinking of them today. I want to acknowledge the member for Herbert, Cathy O'Toole, who has taken leave from this place to be with her community. I spoke to her just before Question Time. She certainly informs me that everything, in her opinion, is in place that ought to be in place. From the Navy to the RAF to the Army, local government and state, she said they're doing a mighty job. Indeed, no doubt all of the Queenslanders in the affected areas are. Queenslanders are a practical people and they're all too familiar with facing natural disasters. But every cyclone is different and unpredictable. So all of us strongly urge everyone in affected areas to pay attention to the warnings and to listen to the authorities as the Prime Minister has outlined. If you've been told to evacuate, don't delay. If you're staying put, use the time to prepare. Have the first aid kit and the water and the other essential supplies ready. Please be good neighbours, Check to see if older residents need help. Charge your phones while the power is on. Make sure your pets are safe inside. But most of all, look after each other and stay safe.
The member for Kennedy. Member for Kennedy.
Yeah. I'd just like to add the two speakers are saying here. The Mayor of Newcastle rang me after Cyclone Larry and he said, your real problems will set in 2 years' time. And I'd like everyone in the parliament to understand that I found that to be extremely true. People took terrible punishment at the time and, as the Prime Minister said, showed great resilience and courage in the face of great tragedy. But 2 years later, there were very serious problems that set in for us. So I'd just like to thank both the leaders, but also add that as one of the also areas under threat here.
Questions? The member for Dawson.
Could I briefly make a comment and thank the Prime Minister and Opposition Leader? It looks as though the eye of the cyclone will cross tomorrow morning in my electorate somewhere between perhaps Ayr and Mackay. It is tracking further south. I've got to say that local mayors who I've been in contact with over the last 24 hours have been particularly gracious of the support from the federal government in terms of the Defence Force deployments. It is very pleasing to see, and all we can say is it's in the hands of God at the moment as to what happens. We can only hope and pray that the cyclone either changes course or that damage is as least as it can be.
Questions without notice. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question's to the Prime Minister. Why is the Prime Minister looking after big business with nearly a $50 billion tax handout while doing nothing to stop nearly 700,000 workers having their pay cut?
Yeah.
The Prime Minister has the
Thank
floor.
you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, Mr Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has been paying visits to Australian businesses in recent times, Velo Cycles, Loose Ink Engineering, all businesses that desperately need a tax cut, desperately need some help to make more investments, to do better, to ensure that they can employ more Australians. And they know that to have more jobs you need more investment. And indeed that was what the Leader of the Opposition used to say. Remember, he gave a number of very powerful speeches in this House and when Labor was in government. And he said a cut in company taxes, which he was arguing for. I hear an interjection from the member for McMahon. He wrote a book about it. Look, I'll get to you, Sunshine, I'll get to you. Just hang on. So first we have the Leader of the Opposition. He said a cut in company tax will deliver more investment, more productivity, more employment. And then, hard followed in by the member for McMahon, not limited to speeches in the chamber. He wrote a book. Mr Speaker, volumes of it can be found in any good bookstore where remaindering occurs. It's there, piled up next to the Kung Fu cookbook in colour. It's all there. The member for McMahon's book. And he argues for that, for cutting company tax. And, Mr Speaker, we've had right across the board. They all argued for it, and they were following in the footsteps of the great Paul Keating. And then, of course, when we get to the Fair Work Commission, which they all defended. In fact, they established it. They put everybody on it. They gave them a reference on penalty rates and committed again and again that they would back it in. The Leader of the Opposition pledged, not once, not twice, but 3 times on Neil Mitchell's program on 3AW. He said, I will back the Fair Work Commission's decision, even if it results in a reduction in Sunday penalty rates. Oh yes, he said to the people of Melbourne. He was committed, absolutely committed. And, Mr Speaker, what has the Fair Work Commission done? Established by the Labor Party, the personnel chosen by the Labor Party, the reference written by the Labor Party, it's considered all of the evidence that it's had, and it's concluded that bringing Sunday penalty rates closer to Saturday rates will result in more businesses offering more employment to more Australians. It's the Fair Work Commission's decided to back small business. It's the Labor Party that is abandoning small business.
The member for Ford.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Will the Prime Minister update the House on the action the government is taking, including ordering the ACCC to review electricity prices to ensure that energy is reliable and affordable? How will these measures benefit households and businesses of Australia, including in my electorate of Ford?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank
Members
you.
on my left.
I thank the honourable member for his question. Mr Speaker, the businesses and the families, the honourable member's electorate and in the electorate of every honourable member in this House depend upon secure and affordable electricity. It is the lifeblood of our economy. We need it at every level of our business. Every part of our lives depends on secure and affordable electricity. And Mr Speaker, we're seeing today an extraordinary combination of failed Labor policies which are driving electricity prices up and driving reliability down. During the 6 years of the Labor government, household electricity prices went up by 100%. 100%. And Mr Speaker, they then declined with the abolition of the carbon tax, and then now they're rising again. And we're taking action. We're setting out to ensure that their gas supply is secure. We've got a commitment from the gas producers because, again, Labor policy has made gas scarce. Labor policy has made gas scarce. The Victorian government, the latest example of energy recklessness, the Victorian government has allowed the huge Hazelwood power station to close, tripling the royalty on brown coal, doing nothing to provide the backup or the storage required to replace it, or an alternative generator, have done nothing except ban the exploration and development of gas in Victoria. Gas, of course, being the fuel that we were supposed to be transitioning to, but of course it's not affordable. Now, Mr Speaker, we've seen these rises in electricity prices. We've seen the criticism of the way in which the retail market is operating, particularly in Victoria, and the Treasurer has asked the Australian Consumer and Competition Commission, the Consumer's Defender, to investigate this move in retail prices, and they will thoroughly investigate that, and they will give us, using their compulsory powers, the information we need to ensure that we protect Australian families, Australian businesses and Australian jobs. Mr Speaker, our energy policy is based on economics and engineering. We're providing the backup, we're defending the market, we're backing storage, we're about to embark on the largest storage project in our history, and we're making sure the consumer watchdog is there protecting Australian families from rip-offs in the electricity market. We're getting on with the job. Labor's standing in the way of affordable and reliable electricity.
Just before I call the Leader of the Opposition, I think it's a good time to remind members on both sides I will not continually keep warning them, particularly if they have a track record. The member for Wakefield is warned, as is the member for McMahon. The Leader of the Opposition has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. In question time last Thursday, the Prime Minister refused to say whether his submission would ask the Fair Work Commission not to implement the penalty rates decision. Can the Prime Minister advise whether the government took any action at all in its submission to stop workers from having their pay cut?
Hear, hear.
The Prime Minister has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the government defends the independent umpire. The government believes that an independent umpire should set wages and conditions. We defend the Fair Work Commission. We respect their judgment. We respect their investigation. We defend the independent umpire, which was an article of faith for the Labor Party for 120 years. And Mr Speaker, it's not just the Leader of the Opposition that's defended the independent umpire. That other tribune of the workers, that other populist hero, the member for Gorton. He said only 2 years ago, he said these questions would be best left to the independent umpire. That's what he said. Now he's denouncing the Fair Work Commission. He must be ringing up all the time, apologising to all his union mates who sit on it. But anyway, he's denouncing it now. They defended the independent umpire, and the grounds of the independent umpire were absolutely sound. They heard the evidence, they listened to the submissions, and they concluded there'd be more jobs, more businesses open on Sunday if they brought Sunday rates closer to Saturday rates. That was the decision, and you'd have to ask, what was the Leader of the Opposition thinking when he started the inquiry? Did he think the Fair Work Commission was going to increase Sunday penalty rates? I don't think so. He knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly what he's doing. He can't be trusted. One backflip after another. No integrity, no consistency from that Leader of the Opposition.
The member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Will the Treasurer update the House on the government's efforts to drive down energy costs for hard-working Australians and their families? How is the government acting to ensure Australia has a competitive and transparent energy market that delivers reliable and affordable energy to consumers?
The Treasurer has the call. Member for Hunter.
Thank you.
Member for Hunter is warned.
Thank you,
Treasurer
Mr Speaker. I thank the member for Boothby for her question. She knows what it's like to live in a state where the state government can't keep the lights on, Mr Speaker. She knows that. She knows that full well, and hence her keen interest to make sure that Australian households and Australian businesses can benefit from the policies of this government, which is doing everything it can to ensure we put downward pressure on upward increases in electricity prices. Under the Labor Party, when they were in government, electricity prices doubled, Mr Speaker, under those opposite. And during Labor's time in government, electricity prices were increasing at an average rate annually of 12.5% per year. Now, Mr Speaker, under the coalition, the average annual rate of growth in electricity prices is less than 0.5%. What that means is, under Labor's policies, electricity prices increased more than 25 times greater than is occurring under this side, Mr Speaker, under this side. And our record is to keep these prices down and to do everything in our power to ensure we can. That's why we're acting on gas supplies. That's why the Prime Minister has called in, Mr Speaker, the gas suppliers to ensure that we can have the certainty of the supply of gas during peak periods. It's why the Minister for Energy has been acting on competition reforms and regulatory reforms to ensure, whether it's on the pipelines or gas issues, that these are being addressed. It's why this government is acting on energy storage with projects like Snowy 2 or Coltana or projects of that nature. And it is why today, Mr Speaker, I have tasked the ACCC to prise open the books of electricity retailers to ensure that Australian consumers, families, households and businesses are going to get a fair deal. And this process has already proved its worth with the East Coast gas supply market study, which is undertaken by the ACCC, which this government is now acting on the findings of, Mr Speaker. So the ACCC have demonstrated their worthiness and their skills and experience in being able to pinpoint the issues so this government can take further action to put downward pressure on electricity prices. They will report back with an interim report within 6 months, and the final report will be delivered by the 30th of June of next year. Now, this is in stark contrast to what the Labor Party did when they were in government and what they were trying to do. They said they'd do something about cost of living. And the Shadow Treasurer then and now and the Minister responsible then came up with it. You remember it, Grocery Watch. And he came up with Fuel Watch, Mr Speaker. And having huffed and puffed about controlling prices, he dropped them some $20 million later and 6 months afterwards, not because there was no legislation, he just knew they were a complete failure, as the Labor Party's policies were on all these issues when they're in government.
The member for Gorton has the call.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. On Friday, Labor made a submission to the Fair Work Commission, including opposing any move to review and cut the penalty rates of 84,000 workers in the hairdressing and beauty industry. Why won't the Prime Minister admit to the House and to the Australian people that he did absolutely nothing to protect the penalty rates of hairdressers and beauticians?
The Prime Minister has the call.
Well, I thank the honourable member for his question. I've already referred to the way in which the honourable member defended the independence of the Fair Work Commission and, in fact, extolled it. The reality, Mr. Speaker, is that the honourable members opposite, in their focus on workers today, should have regard to the 450 workers at Hazelwood who are going to lose their jobs, and they should be paying attention to that. And we, on the other hand, are providing over $40 million in funding to support enterprise, development, new jobs, new opportunities in the Gippsland area. And the members for Gippsland Macmillan have been working with the government to ensure that that community which is being hard hit is being provided with support. And, Mr. Speaker, what we're also doing is spending $600 million on infrastructure through those areas. But you can see the member opposite has no interest in those workers, none at all.
The Prime Minister will resume his seat. The member for Sydney will cease interjecting. Has the Prime Minister concluded his answer? The Prime Minister's concluded his answer. Member for Gorton will resume his seat. Members on both sides will cease interjecting, otherwise I'll have an early exit from question time. The member for Braddon is warned. Just before I call the next question, I inform the House we have present on the floor of the chamber this afternoon His Excellency Mr Wu, the Ambassador of the Republic of Korea. On behalf of the House, I extend a very warm welcome to you here today. And in the gallery, we also have present the former member for Solomon, Natasha Griggs. Welcome to question time. The member for Kennedy.
Employment Minister, the LNP issued 35,457 visas. The ALP made it 165,000. Meat processing giant AMH protested, their competitors paying 457s, 30% below the award. TWU revelations showed Sydney airport workers rostered on 3 hours continuous shifts, sleeping next to baggage carousels on dirty concrete floors abounding with rat droppings, dirt and mites. In 6 months, 12 deaths on construction sites. Government's only reaction? Attacks upon the protective bulwarks, the CFMEU. Surely government's time would be better spent targeting CEOs' obscene pay levels instead of paying conditions for hard-working Australians.
Leader of the House might just resume his seat for a second. I'm just pondering whether there was actually a question there. I'll let the member for Kennedy's had his 45 seconds. He's not getting 90. I can assure the House of that. The Leader of the House can address the substance of the question if he'd like. The member for Kennedy doesn't have the call. He'll resume his seat. The Leader of the House.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Kennedy for his question. And I think the gist of the question, having been here for 24 years like the member for Kennedy, I've learnt to be able to interpret much of what the member for Kennedy has said over that almost quarter of a century. And I think the gist of the member for Kennedy's question, Mr Speaker, is that government should put the conditions, the safety and the pay of workers foremost in their decision-making process. And the second part of his question was that the CFMEU is the bulwark of our protector in terms of these kinds of issues in the workplace. So, in terms of the first part of his question, I think that most members in this House would agree that one of the primary responsibilities of any government is to look after workers' safety, to look after their conditions, to look after their pay. And that is why this government has taken the necessary actions through the building up of the economy, through the creation of jobs, through putting in place the architecture to build the pay and conditions of workers every day. That's what the Treasurer does. That's what Senator Cash does in the Senate as the Minister for Employment. And the Prime Minister, and I can reassure the member for Kennedy that the Prime Minister and his government are absolutely committed to taking care of the conditions and the safety of workers in their workplaces. In terms of the second part of the member for Kennedy's question, which was the defence of the CFMEU, on that question I think I have to part company with him, because my view and the view of the government is not that the CFMEU is the bulwark of our protections in terms of the workplace. In fact, the Hayden Royal Commission made it absolutely clear that the CFMEU is one of the major problems in the construction sector. The Hayden Royal Commission said that they had a low regard for both civil and criminal laws in the workplace, that they didn't believe the rule of law applied to them, and Justice Hayden recommended the establishment of an independent authority in order to restore the rule of law to the workplace. And that is why we introduced and passed the Australian Building and Construction Commission. It is why we introduced and passed the Registered Organisations Commission, and it is why we are introducing and will soon pass through the House of Representatives the corrupting benefits legislation, because this legislation, working with the ABCC and the ROC, will ensure that workers are placed first and foremost, not dodgy union leaders and not business people, for that matter, who fall for being shook down by unions like the CFMEU. So we certainly do support the member for Kennedy's intentions in support of workers and their safety, but we certainly do not agree with him that the answer to that is the CFMEU.
The member for Mallee.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister for Agriculture and Water Resources. Will the Deputy Prime Minister update the House on what action the government has taken to secure the future of 250 employees at the Hayfield Timber Mill? Is the Minister aware of any threats to the jobs of hard-working regional Australians?
The Deputy Prime Minister has the call.
Well, Mr Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question and note the concern that is starting to become ever escalated in Victoria about the threat to the timber industry and the hard-working men and women in that industry, and they're wanting to know who in Canberra is actually going to start standing up for them. And I'm glad that we are standing up for these working men and women. And I know the concerns that the member for Gippsland has regards this, making sure he stands up for those forestry workers. And I know the concerns for the member for Murray has in standing up for those forestry workers. I know the concerns the member for Mallee has in standing up for those forestry workers. I know the concerns the member for Macmillan has in standing up for these forestry workers. There could be other people in other regional seats who could be standing up for these forestry workers. I know it's incredibly important that you stand up for these forestry workers. We've got to protect the dignity of these people and make sure they have a job. And it's very important that we don't put possums before people. It's very important that we stand up for these people. It's very important that you use your time in this chamber to go into bat for these people and make sure that you don't hide behind other issues and try to avoid the issue of this, because if you did avoid the issue, you'd be avoiding the issue like members for the CFMEU members here. The member for Shortland, he's never stood up for these workers. The member for Griffith got herself on Instagram laughing about the issue, laughing about the forestry workers. Well, that's a shame. You should be standing up for them. The member for Gordon, maybe he should be supporting his brother in standing up for these forestry workers, because it's an issue that the Victorian government could fix. It's an issue the Victorian government could fix. If it wasn't chasing leadbeater possums in votes in St Kilda, it might actually stand up for some of these forestry workers. It might actually stand up for these people. And we know that these people who are working, they're probably some of the people who are doing it toughest. They're probably some of the poorer people in our community with unskilled jobs or jobs in the forest that have been supporting their families. And it's a shame when the Labor Party no longer represents labourers. It's a shame when the Labor Party has given up on labourers, given up on workers. Not once has anybody from the Labor Party, come to the dispatch box to try and defend the jobs of working men and women in the forestry industry. A forestry industry that supports 21,000 people. A forestry industry that today we have from the Gippsland mayors. They've called for immediate action to avert a community catastrophe at Hayfield. And it goes on the back because they're true to form. They're not standing up for the workers at Hazelwood either. Not standing up for them either. All of a sudden the workers at Hazelwood, the workers at Hayfield are having to rely on other people to stand up for their jobs.
These are blue-collar workers who in the past would have thought that the Labor Party would have been going into bat for them, but they're not. The Labor Party are going to bat for the Australian Greens. They're going to bat for people on that corner of the chamber over there who do not want to stand up for Australian workers.
Member for Sydney.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. The Australia Institute found the decision to cut penalty rates could blow a $650 million hole in the budget over the forward estimates. Has the government modelled the cost to the budget of the decision to cut penalty rates?
The Minister for Urban Infrastructure will cease interjecting. The Treasurer has the call.
I thank the member for her question. I'd reached for my file on education. I thought the question might have been about education, but it wasn't, Mr Speaker. I'm happy to address the question that she's raised. The budget each year takes into account all the various parameter estimates that need to be considered to provide the forward estimate forecasts, whether it's on revenue or these other matters, and these will all be considered. But what I find interesting, Mr Speaker, is when the Labor Party comes into this place and walks away from defending the independent commission.
The member for McEwen.
I think about the history, Mr Speaker, and I think about the history when I go back to when they were in government and when penalty rates were actually cut at that time from 200% to 175%, and I don't remember the Labor Party at that time saying, no, that decision should be reversed and legislation should be brought in. Those opposite in the Labor Party, when they were in government and they were facing the first cut in penalty rates, at that time initiated by the modernisation of the award process, they didn't do it then. But, Mr Speaker, there was another opportunity.
The Treasurer will resume his seat. The Manager of Opposition Business on a point of order.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. On direct relevance, we've let it go for a minute without raising the point of order. The question has no effective preamble, no barb in it. It's asking whether or not the Treasurer has modelled the cost. It's a very straight question and he should be brought back to the answer.
The Treasurer is still on the policy topic. I'm listening very closely. The member for Whitlam. The Treasurer is entitled to a preamble. He's on the policy topic, but I'll keep listening to him. But the Manager of Opposition Business is right that this did not contain a preamble. So,
Mr Speaker, as opposed to a preamble, and in the answer to my question I said all the relevant parameters will be considered in the updating of forecasts for the budget. So, Mr Speaker, that is the normal process, and that is what we will be doing in the normal process. And if they wish to review transcripts, I've said similar things in relation to similar questions since the decision was brought down. But I am also asked about penalty rates, Mr Speaker, and so when penalty rates were cut from 200% to 175% on a Sunday, they did nothing. When they were cut then from 175% to 150% following on from a decision of the Commission, they did nothing. Now, on this occasion, they decide that they think they need to intervene on the independent decision of the Commission. What this shows, Mr Speaker, is the Leader of the Opposition is not interested in penalty rates for workers, Mr Speaker. He is just a cheap opportunist who will run on any issue, Mr Speaker, to run down the economy or anything else just to pursue his shallow political interest.
The member for Grey.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Environment and Energy, and I refer him to the case of O'Leary Walker Wines in the Clare Valley, incidentally just out of my electorate and in the member for Wakefield's electorate. But their business has seen a 100% rise in the cost of electricity in the last 12 months. Will the Minister update the House on the government's action to ensure that hard-working businesses and families receive a more affordable deal for energy? Is the Minister aware of any other approaches?
The Minister for the Environment and Energy.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Grey for his question and acknowledge his deep concern for the rising electricity prices for those in businesses in his electorate, like Olympic Dam, like Nearstar at Port Pirie, like Ariam at Whyalla. But he's also concerned about the impact of price rises right across his state, like O'Leary Walker, the winemakers in the Clare Valley. Now, they have seen their electricity prices dramatically increase to $50,000 a year, Mr Speaker. Now, they've been in business for some 16 years. They employ 12 people. Now they're looking at having to spend more than $20,000 on diesel generators, which they say will mean they can't employ as many people as they otherwise would. That's why we on this side of the House are very focused on significant energy market reforms, trying to get more gas into the domestic market and reduce the transport price and the transportation of gas, through changes through the LMR process to rein in network costs, to invest record amounts in battery storage, and particularly the Snowy Hydro 2.0, Mr Speaker. And also today's announcement by the Treasurer and the Prime Minister around the ACCC review is very significant, Mr Speaker, because retail prices can make up to 25% of the household bill, and it's very opaque, Mr Speaker. Often retail prices are bundled in with wholesale prices, and we know that the margins are high and that some customers, some 50% of customers, have not changed suppliers over the last 5 years. So this will be very important in getting the real facts on the table so we can push real reforms. And I'm pleased to say to the House, Mr Speaker, since the Prime Minister and the Treasurer's announcement this morning, the Energy Users Association of Australia has said the ACCC investigation will help clear the air and improve transparency for consumers, which is a great outcome. And Energy Consumers Australia has also welcomed the announcement. But, Mr Speaker, what do you think the Labor Party does when we make a good announcement about driving down retail costs? What do you think they do? Well, they put out a press release, the member for Port Adelaide and the underpaid member for Fenner. They rush out a press release, and they quote the Australian Energy Council. Now, Mr Speaker, who is the Australian Energy Council? It's the body representing the retailers, Mr Speaker. The body representing the retailers. And the Energy Council says the following: retail electricity markets are working effectively and efficiently. This is who you are quoting in your press release. Again, after putting up electricity prices by 100% when they were last in office, are now citing the representative of the retailers against the consumers. No wonder the member for Port Adelaide is trying not to listen, because he thinks what happened in Adelaide was merely a hiccup. We care about jobs, we care about investment, and we're doing all we can to lower electricity prices.
The member for Rankin.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Can the Prime Minister confirm that scrapping the deficit levy in the budget will deliver a tax cut of more than $16,000 a year for millionaires? Why does the Prime Minister believe that millionaires deserve a tax cut, but retail workers should cop a pay cut of up to $77 every week?
The Treasurer.
Mr Speaker, I thank the Prime Minister for the opportunity to respond to the member's question.
The Treasurer resume his seat. The members for Wills and Lawler will leave under 94A. The Treasurer has the call.
Mr Speaker, the member asked the question about the deficit levy, which he knows comes in for an income of $180,000. That's the top marginal tax rate. On 3AW on the 21st of April 2016, Neil Mitchell asked the Leader of the Opposition a question. He says, is $180,000 a year rich? The Leader of the Opposition said, no, it's not. No, it's not, Mr Speaker. But it doesn't stop there. The hypocrisy of those opposite is amazing. If I look at ABC Insiders, the Shadow Treasury said, we don't like this increase in the tax, talking about the deficit levy, therefore we wouldn't be supporting it. We don't like it and we don't support it. He said Paul Keating started the process of reducing those marginal tax rates to make us more competitive as a nation in a globalised world. That's the direction we should be heading in. Well, the direction that the Shadow Minister wants to head in is completely the other direction, Mr Speaker. Now, the best one, though, comes down to the Shadow Treasurer many years ago when he was talking about the issue of tax cuts, and he said the other tactic is to portray the Labor Party as being opposed to tax cuts or being opposed to tax cuts for high-income earners. He said both of these allegations are untrue. We all like a tax cut. Everybody likes a tax cut. People at the upper end of the income scale like a tax cut, and they deserve a tax cut. That was from Chris Bowen, the Shadow Minister now, Mr Speaker, back in June 2005. This shadow treasurer cannot stand up to his own shadow.
Members on my left. Member for Gorton is warned. Members on both sides will cease interjecting. I said at the start of question time I wouldn't keep continually warning members. The member for Lyons was bellowing uncontrollably. He can go back to his office under 94A. And others who have been warned or who were ejected last week are on similar notice. They are not going to disrupt question time. They were not elected to come here and disrupt the proceedings of the House. The member for Wide Bay.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Small Business. Will the minister update the House on action the government is taking to protect small businesses from the impact of a costly and unreliable energy supply? What hurdles stand in the way to achieving energy affordability for hard-working Australian small businesses, such as Blue Logistics in Gympie, which has seen its power bill dramatically rise by 60% in the last 2 years?
The Minister for Small Business.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Wide Bay for his question. The Wide Bay electorate has more than 13,000 small businesses, and the member knows that it is those small businesses which create jobs and which create opportunities. I visited Gympie in the member's electorate recently and met Tim Jensen of Blue Logistics Solutions. Running a fleet of prime movers and stainless steel food-grade tankers, Tim specialises in the collection of and transport of milk and other bulk food-grade liquids, Mr Speaker. His power prices have increased 60% in the past 2 years. 60% in the past 2 years. Tim is running a business connecting farmers with freight movement and families with food throughout 5 states. What could be more important? But high energy prices are a barrier to Tim's investment. Now, high energy prices cost jobs. High energy prices stop investment, such as Tim's, and high energy prices mean small businesses cannot have a go, cannot grow. That is why this government has a plan to deliver energy security and affordability to small businesses and families who need the confidence that when they flick the switch, electricity will be available and affordable. Now, Mr Speaker, that's what this government can and will deliver, for example through Snowy Hydro Mark II. Today the government has announced the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission. The consumer watchdog will conduct an extensive inquiry into rising power prices. The ACCC will investigate the national electricity market and retailer behaviour to ensure that the market is operating competitively, Mr Speaker. That is because this government understands the cost of ideology in energy. We know it affects people such as Terry and Liz Polson, small business people from Dandenong in Victoria, who were in the national headlines today, Mr Speaker. They are considering their business future after a shock electricity bill of more than $4,000 last month. That's up from an average of $1,300 per month, and it has real impacts on their small business. Terry and Liz have a dozen employees, so sky-high prices and empty promises from those opposite mean precious little. They mean very little when retailers announce a 13% price hike in power prices for small businesses after the closure of Hazelwood, Mr Speaker. They mean very little when household bills increase 10%, and they mean very little when you're a small business trying to pay workers' wages. Mr Speaker, the member for Wide Bay asks about uncertainty in small business. Well, I can tell him that more than doubling electricity prices costs uncertainty. A carbon tax, those opposite want to reintroduce one, creates uncertainty. Citizens' assemblies create uncertainty. Mr Speaker, unrealistic renewable energy targets create uncertainty, yet these are just a handful of the 13 energy policies those opposite have had in 8 years. Higher electricity prices for all Australians. That's what those opposites stand for, Mr Speaker. That's why we're calling in the watchdog. That's why we're delivering a better deal for small businesses and consumers.
The minister's time has concluded. The member for McMahon.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. Is the Treasurer aware that last week he failed on no fewer than 12 occasions to confirm that the entire $50 billion handout to big business would be in his budget this year? Is the Treasurer also aware that over the weekend the Prime Minister did what he could not and confirmed the entire tax cut would be in the budget? Given the Treasurer's clear incompetence, will he now stand down and take a pay cut instead of inflicting a pay cut on 700,000 Australians?
Treasurer has the call.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Later this afternoon, the Shadow Treasurer will have the opportunity to walk into this parliament and vote for something he says that he has always believed in. It's a Labor thing to have the ambition of reducing company tax because it promotes investment, creates jobs and drives growth. It's a statement of fact, he has said, which I agree with. He says he agrees with himself. I have previously said the nation should be aiming for a 25% corporate tax rate. Now the Leader of the Opposition has said that reducing the corporate tax rate flows on to workers in the form of higher wages, therefore improving standards of living. That's what he told ACOS. And he has also said that cutting the company income tax rate leads to more jobs and higher wages. Now, Mr Speaker, if they believe in more wages, better wages for Australian workers, if they believe in more investment, if they believe in a growing economy, then what they should do this afternoon when this bill is before this chamber is they should come into this place and they should vote for it. If they refuse to vote for it, they have not only exposed their hypocrisy, but they have exposed the shallowness of their thinking and the weakness of their resolve.
The member for Moore.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Foreign Affairs. Will the Minister advise the House on the importance to our region of the fight against ISIS in Iraq and Syria?
The Minister for Foreign Affairs.
Mr Speaker, I thank the member for Moore for his question and note his concern about ISIS, the self-described Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, a very dangerous and brutal terrorist organisation. Our objectives in our fight against ISIS remain destroying its base in Iraq and Syria, countering its poisonous and violent ideology, preventing its spread globally and taking away its capacity to carry out terrorist attacks globally, regionally, including in Australia. Mr Speaker, Australia is already one of the largest contributors to the fight against ISIS, and we have about 1,000 defence personnel in theatre. In Iraq, they have been training now 20,000 Iraqi security force personnel, including police, who are involved in the operations to take back Mosul from ISIS. In Syria, the RWAF have carried out about 2,000 missions against ISIS strongholds. Last week, I attended the first full meeting of the Global Coalition to Counter ISIS. 68 member countries now form that coalition, and this was designed to accelerate the coalition efforts to defeat ISIS. Mr Speaker, amongst the outcomes from that meeting, the Global Coalition confirmed that it's necessary for us to counter the ideology, counter the narrative, and to encourage more voices of moderation within Islam and politically to be more persuasive to those at risk of radicalisation. It was also acknowledged that more must be done to create economic opportunities and greater political engagement in countries where there are large numbers of young people in particular who risk alienation, and we need to prevent that. Mr Speaker, it was also acknowledged that our region is facing a particularly challenging counter-terrorism environment. Islamic extremists have infiltrated the southern Philippines, and the leader of the dangerous terrorist group known as Abu Sayyaf was declared last year as an ISIS emir. This is Isnilon Hapilon, and that means he's the regional commander. The Philippines government are concerned. Indeed, President Duterte confirmed that is their belief that ISIS may well declare a province of the ISIS Caliphate from the Middle East in the southern Philippines. The Australian government has responded with a package of support to promote development and peace in Mindanao and the southern Philippines in particular. The Global Coalition is determined to ensure that we defeat ISIS in Iraq and Syria and prevent its spread to our region.
The member for McMahon.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Treasurer. And I refer to reports that the Treasurer's colleagues are saying his job could be on the line if he doesn't succeed with this year's budget. with one frontbench colleague saying, and I quote, "He'll need to perform or he's out." Is that why the Treasurer is so desperate to pass his $50 billion handout to big business instead of protecting the penalty rates of ordinary Australians?
Treasurer, I haven't called the Treasurer. I haven't called the Treasurer. I made the point with fair warning last week that it wasn't sufficient to ask a question. In this case, I believe deliberately ask a question that's mostly out of order, and then at the very end of the question seek to maintain the whole question is in order. In this case, when I rule out the pieces that are out of order, there is nothing to ask the Treasurer. Let me put it in more simple language. You can't come along with a Holden badge and stick it on a Mazda and say it's a Holden. The question's out of order. The member for Dunkley. Let me remind members, interjecting on me is particularly serious. Member for Dunkley.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Immigration and Border Protection. Will the Minister update the House on the government's efforts to assist persecuted minorities seeking refuge from terrorism in Syria and Iraq? What steps has the government taken to ensure the integrity of the program?
The Minister for Immigration and Border Protection.
Well, Mr Speaker, I thank the honourable member for his question, and I want to say thank you to all of the colleagues on this side of the parliament, indeed all of the parliament, for the support of the government's program in bringing people in through the refugee and humanitarian program. I want to pay tribute to the former Prime Minister, the member for Warringah, and the current Prime Minister for their stewardship of this very important policy. The government has consistently said that one of the dividends of stopping boats has been that we want to bring people in the right way, and we've done that. Now, Mr Speaker, as we've seen tragically in London over the course of the last few days, and as we've seen elsewhere around the world, we do need to make sure that the people that we are bringing into our country through any migration program have to be the right people, and those people that are going to contribute to our country, to build a new life here, to educate their children, to make sure that they provide a better future for generations that would never have been imagined previously. We have to do that as opposed to bringing in people that may seek to do harm to our fellow Australians. And so we have taken very seriously the objective to scrutinise each and every one of the applicants within this intake, and we have given ourselves the very best chance to make sure that all of these people who are coming in under the Syrian and Iraqi program will contribute to our country and will be great Australians. I can inform the House that we have, through what has been an unprecedented attempt to scrutinise through biometric testing and collaboration with our Five Eyes partners, we have looked at each and every application, and we have excluded 30 or so applicants who have had adverse biometric matches on national security grounds. A number of individuals had also received an adverse security assessment. None of these people have travelled to our country. None ever will. And the reality is, Mr Speaker, we have been able to save lives through this program. I want to pay tribute to those people who are in our offices, in particular in Amman, in Beirut, in Ankara and Dubai, in particular those staff that went with the assistance of security officials into the northern part of Iraq, a very dangerous zone, obviously, and were able to rescue Yazidi women out of that zone. Some of those stories that have been relayed to us are absolutely horrific. Absolutely horrific. And the fact that all of us as Australians should stand proud today, not only with the success that we've prevailed upon in relation to that we've presided over in relation to this program, but to the way in which these people, all of them, will contribute in a positive way to our country into the future. That is what a measured and successful migration program is about, and the Australian public have demonstrated over a long period of time that if governments of the day have their migration programs in check, they will support these sort of investments into the humanitarian program.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thanks, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister is giving a $50 billion handout to big business,
and a tax cut for millionaires on July the 1st, while supporting pay cuts for nearly 700,000 Australians.
Members on my
Why
right.
does the Prime Minister have a plan for big business but always has an excuse to do nothing for Australian workers and their penalty rates?
The Minister for Immigration, the Treasurer, the Prime Minister has the call.
Mr. Speaker, the plan for big business that the Leader of the Opposition has is taking secret payments to the AWU. That's what he had. Let's go through a few of them. He says he's proud of his time as a union leader. And there he is. Can't take it, can you?
The Prime
Rushing
Minister
in,
will resume his
rushing
seat.
in.
Members on my right, the member for Corangamite. Members on my right, the Manager of Opposition Business.
Thanks, Mr Speaker.
On a point of order.
On a point of order, on reflection on members.
The Manager of Opposition Business will resume his seat. It might assist her own side, if she's not concerned about the House, for the member for Lindsay to cease interjecting. I'm listening very carefully to the Prime Minister's statement, the Prime Minister's words. So far, from what I've heard, he has referred to events prior to the. Well, I was trying to listen through what was loud interjections on both sides. Let me assist the House by saying this. There was a statement made in answer to one of the questions last week, which on reflection I felt I should have asked to be withdrawn, and I've asked other things to have been withdrawn since. What would assist me is if members don't interject in such a fashion that I'm prevented from hearing. I'm going to keep hearing the Prime Minister, and I'm listening very closely. And the Prime Minister knows he can't reflect on members.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition talks about plans for big business and dealings with big business. Here are some details of payments by big business which were kept secret from the members of the Australian Workers' Union and were paid to the Australian Workers' Union. Tees John Holland, $300,000 while they built the Eastlink Freeway. The AWU issued false invoices to disguise the payments as training, backstrain research, forum tickets and conference sponsorships. None of these benefits were provided. ACI Operations, another example of big business, paid the AWU in Victoria $500,000 while workers were laid off at the Spotswood glass manufacturing plant. The AWU invoiced the payments as paid education leave, but the payments were used to pay off a union loan on its premises. And what about, Mr Speaker, Chiquita Mushrooms? That's a very famous one, paid the AWU $24,000. Again, the AWU did not trouble their members with any details of these payments from big business. And what was that invoiced as? Again, paid education leave. You've got to hand it. You've got to hand it to the AWU. They're absolutely committed to education, at least on all those dodgy invoices. And what about Unibuilt, Mr Speaker, who made a campaign donation to the member for Maribyrnong in 2007 when he was running for Parliament, $32,000, at the same time as the company was negotiating an enterprise agreement with the union of which he was the National Secretary. So, Mr Speaker, we're not going to take lectures from the Labor Party about dealings with big business. They say they're proud of the Leader of the Opposition's record as a union leader. One secret payment after another. If he was so proud of those payments, why doesn't he tell the world? Why doesn't he tell us? Why doesn't he tell us what they were really for? We know they weren't for the real matters set out on the invoices. Let him tell us the story. He's got a great barrister there, the member for Isaacs. He says he's especially proud of the Leader of the Opposition. He could get him to make a case. Powerful advocate that he is. He could sell anything. Mr Speaker, we don't care who presents the facts, but it's about time Labor told the truth about these secret payments from big business.
The member for Fisher.
My question is to the Minister for Defence Industry, representing the Minister for Employment. Will the minister inform the House why it is important to outlaw secret payments between big unions and big business? Is the minister aware of any examples where the integrity of enterprise bargaining agreements has been undermined by the behaviour of unions and some businesses?
Well done. The Minister for Defence Industry, representing the
Thank you very much,
Minister
Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for
Employment.
Fisher for his question, because he, like every member on this side of the House, knows that we must end the corrupting benefits in the industrial relations system that have been infecting the relationship between business and the unions for decades. That was identified by the Hayden Royal Commission, and this government is implementing the recommendation to outlaw corrupting benefits and to make the payment of them a criminal act. And I know the member for Fisher is very keen on industrial relations reform, and he, as every member on this side of the House, wants to see that change come about. Now, he asked me about a few examples. Well, there are a few examples. The Prime Minister went through a few just then. Visy Industries, for example, $200,000 to the AWU in 40 secret payments, while they were negotiating 6 enterprise business agreements, Mr Speaker, with the AWU. And the Leader of the Opposition was the Secretary at the time, national and then state. Alcoa, $90,000 to the AWU across 8 secret payments, while they were negotiating 5 enterprise business agreements. Sugar Australia, $16,500 to the AWU, while they were negotiating 3 enterprise business agreements. And it goes on and on, Mr Speaker. Business after business negotiating enterprise business agreements with the AWU, while the Leader of the Opposition was the State Secretary or the National Secretary. Now, the Leader of the Opposition would have us all believe this was all the most amazing coincidence, Mr Speaker.
Truly remarkable.
The most remarkable coincidence, Mr Speaker, that there was no connection between the workers' rights being sold down the river under enterprise business agreements, while secret payments were being made by those businesses to the Australian Workers' Union. It reminds me, Mr Speaker, of that wonderful movie, Muriel's Wedding, with, what a coincidence, Deirdre Chambers, Mr Speaker. Deirdre Chambers, what a coincidence. Make some room for Deirdre Chambers' family so she can come and join us. You can just imagine, Mr Speaker, the Alcoa executives at the Bamboo House, Mr Speaker, in Little Bourke Street. We've been there many times, between their shark fin soup and their duck pancakes, Mr Speaker, and enjoying themselves, discussing their enterprise business agreements, their relationship with the union. Who should come into the restaurant, Mr Speaker? Who should come into the restaurant? Oh, Bill Shorten, what a coincidence.
The Leader of the House will refer to members by their correct titles.
They probably wouldn't have called him that, but nevertheless, their favourite union leader came into the restaurant, Mr Speaker. Make some room, fellas, for the Leader of the Opposition. Make some room while we discuss our enterprise business agreements and the secret payments that we make to the union to ensure the workers are sold down the river. But the AWU has more power in the Victorian Labor Party, and this man has more power over pre-selections and the State Council of the Victorian ALP. That's what it was all about, Mr Speaker, and we're going to keep exposing it.
The member for Perth.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Why is it that under this Prime Minister, companies like James Hardie pay no tax, but workers on award wages end up with a pay cut?
The Prime Minister has the
I thank the honourable member. I thank the honourable member for his question. My government is cracking down on multinational tax avoidance in a manner that has no precedent. Our multinational tax avoidance legislation went through at the end of 2015. The Labor Party voted against it. Can you believe that? They didn't want multinationals to have to pay all the tax they should. And the diverted profits tax, Mr Speaker, which I'll ask the Treasurer to speak about now, is one of the most far-reaching multinational tax avoidance measures in any comparable country. It is a bold move which will reach into the affairs of multinational companies and make sure that they pay their tax. We believe in lower taxes. Oh yes, we do. But paying tax is not optional. We want everybody to pay their tax,
every company, every individual, every business, and unlike Labor, we're doing something about it.
The Treasurer.
As the Prime Minister has said, the diverted profits tax will be voted on in the Senate today. The diverted profits tax builds on the multinational anti-avoidance legislation, which was passed through this chamber and voted against by those opposite. The diverted profits tax provides a penalty tax to multinationals who seek to shift their profits offshore and not pay their fair share of tax. And what we see on the issue of taxation is a Labor Party who says one thing and does another. They say they think companies should pay less tax, but they vote against it. They say they want multinationals to pay their tax, but they vote against it, Mr Speaker. It is this government that cut personal income taxes for workers in this country. People on average weekly earnings, Mr Speaker, ordinary time earnings. In our budget, we provided a tax cut to those workers. Some 500,000 people were not going on to the second highest marginal tax rate because this government took action. So when it comes to taxes, we think they should be lower, but we think everybody should be paying them, and that's what our legislation does. But the Labor Party they talk one game, but when it comes to acting on their convictions, they're all at sea, because the Leader of the Opposition is nothing more than a rank opportunist. The Australian people have worked him out. They know he'll say whatever, do whatever, switch whatever position he has to. One day he says he wants to restore penalty rates. The next day he's doing a deal with big companies to trade away penalty rates. Mr Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition has been worked out by the Australian people. They know that he can't be trusted. Those who sit behind him know he can't be trusted either, Mr Speaker.
The member for Ford.
Well, thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Urban Infrastructure. Will the minister update the House on the Turnbull government's significant infrastructure investment in South East Queensland, including in my electorate of Ford, and how will the delivery of projects like the M1 upgrades support jobs and economic development in South East Queensland?
The Minister
thank
for Urban
the member for Ford for this very important question. He is a member who is committed to delivering outcomes for his constituents, and over the weekend we saw a very significant announcement delivering outcomes for the people of South East Queensland. Over $500 million of infrastructure investment from the Turnbull government and the Queensland government in South East Queensland and throughout Queensland. The M1 Pacific motorway will be widened from 4 lanes to 6 lanes between Mudgee Bar and Varsity Lakes. The M1 Pacific motorway intersection with the Gateway motorway at 8 Mile Plains will be substantially upgraded to reduce that significant bottleneck for southbound motorists. The Mount Lindsay Highway between Browns Plains and Bow Desert will be significantly upgraded, and the Walkerston bypass near Mackay will also be delivered. And, Mr Speaker, there's a lot of credit that needs to go around for these very significant achievements, because there's been advocacy on behalf of their electorates by the member for Ford, who's done a terrific job, a terrific outcome. The member for McPherson has done an extraordinary job in delivering for her electorate. The member for Fadden and the member for Moncrief has done an extraordinary job. The member for Wright has done a remarkable job. The South East Queensland LNP team delivering for their electorates, and of course, we also need to give credit to the member for Dawson for the Walkerston bypass. So the LNP team in Queensland delivering outcomes. There's a lot of credit to go around, because this is a very significant achievement. But I'll tell you who shouldn't get any credit. I'll tell you who shouldn't get any credit. It's this lot. This lot deserve no credit. But of course, the shadow minister has a hide of an elephant, so he puts out a media release on Sunday trying to claim credit. You know, you have to read through this entire media release, and nowhere do you find the statement. Nowhere do you find the statement. Labor committed zero for the Mudgee Bar to Varsity Lakes upgrade. Nowhere do you find that statement. I think this minister needs to talk to the Shadow Minister for Regional Communications. They need some remedial lessons in how to write a media release that tells the truth. We committed zero, because that's what Labor's good at. There was zero for the Mudgee Bar to Varsity Lakes upgrade. This government, together with the Queensland Government committing over $500 million. This is good news for people who use the M1 every day between the Gold Coast and Brisbane, and this is the LNP Queensland team delivering for the people of Queensland, the member for Fort, the member for McPherson and the LNP Queensland team, the Turnbull government delivering.
The Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I ask that further questions be placed on the notice.
Thank the Prime Minister.